Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Enhance Pod. Today's guest is Tara Nicholas, a mindset and performance coach working with athletes, coaches, and teams to develop the mental side of performance. She is a former elite swimmer who competed in the US collegiate system, as well as representing South Africa at the Commonwealth Games. Tara has lived the realities of high performance sport, both physically and mentally. And through that experience, she's developed a coaching approach grounded in clarity, self awareness, and practical application. Her current work focuses on helping athletes train their minds with the same intent as their bodies, building confidence, managing pressure, unlocking consistent performance when it matters most. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time. Welcome to the podcast, Tara.
Thank you, Dick. What an intro. I'm so happy to be here. Really, really excited to dive into these topics. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be chatting to you.
Awesome. Tara, let's kick off with your journey and talk us through a little bit about your experience as a former elite swimmer, traveling to the US, representing the country, and how you've kind of journeyed into this performance coaching space.
Absolutely. So I started swimming at a very young age. I think most athletes that go quite far in their careers start quite young. So I was about 2 and just water safety basics. But it wasn't until much later, high school, I actually took a break in swimming late junior school for a couple of years. I didn't enjoy it as much. And in high school, I thought, let me give it a go again and just see what I could do. And a few weeks after coming back to swimming, I won my first medal in high school. And then it kind of like rippled out from there. So I think I was quite naturally talented, but didn't always know how to work with that. So I just went in on training, super focused. And in about grade 10, I realized I could get to the States for swimming. So I thought, okay, I'm not even going to consider studying in South Africa. So I just trained hard and kept focused on that goal. Ended up in Dallas, Texas in 2014. And that was where sort of the bulk of my Olympic training started. And I say Olympic training because that was always the goal for me, was to get to the Olympics. And I knew that from pretty early on. So I went all in. I was one of those athletes that pretty much sacrificed everything for swimming. And so the training was very intensive for me by choice. And it all sort of culminated in 2016 Olympic trials, where I flew back to South Africa, and the goal was to make the Olympics in the 100 breaststroke. And I was seeded first going into the finals and bombed out and missed the cut by half a second. And it was at such a pivotal time for me because I was about to graduate from college and I didn't really know what was next. So that's kind of the time where you find a new coach or stay with your coach, but find a different way to train with them. And I didn't really have a lot of questions. I didn't know what to ask, who to turn to. I didn't really know what I needed to be asking at that time. So I thought, well, the best thing to move forward would be to kind of just start working. And at that point, that's when things sort of fell apart in swimming. And I didn't really have a closure to swimming that I'd hoped for. It kind of ended abruptly. And about 2017 fizzled out. And then that started the identity crisis for me, which I didn't realize was happening at the time. It's sort of a very nuanced, layered experience of moving out of something I identified through for so long. And it wasn't until much later when I moved back to South Africa and I was teaching that I thought, you know what, I know what I want to do. I had studied psychology in the States and I'd always been fascinated in the human mind and people. I just didn't really know that this is how it would turn out for me. And so while I was teaching in South Africa and coaching swimming, I developed the first rendition of what my business is now, which I called Move Mentality. And I was pretty much working with a handful of school students on and off in different rooms at the school to kind of talk about sports and how they were feeling. And eventually I thought I just wanted to go all in. So moved out of teaching and moved into coaching. I got certified, registered my business. And it's been a couple of years now, but I absolutely love what I do. And the reason I love it is because you're always best positioned to help the person you once were. And it's not a selfish endeavor. It's just that innately, I feel really passionate about standing in the gap for all of the things that athletes sometimes don't even know that they need, like words or ideas or a frame of reference or a different way to think about something simple that can actually set their talent on fire or their hard work on fire and give them a chance to feel what they've worked really hard for. So that's where I stand today. And working with athletes is one of the most fulfilling things I've done to date.
Thank you for sharing your story, Tara. I want to make a few points and comments there. And I always think about this when it comes to physio as well, but I don't think it needs to be a prerequisite for the person to have excelled in the sport or, in sports in general to understand athletes. But I do think it's also massively advantageous to be able to connect with what they're going through. So I think of in my space, having worked with really elite athletes and adolescents, I kind of know the journey of where it gets to and what pressures and things kind of happen along the way, and that gives you context. So it's incredible that you've swam at such a high level, been through probably some of the toughest parts of the athlete's journey, and now are available to help athletes kind of create and map out their own path. So I think that's really, really integral, and I think it's a part that makes you unique, and I'm sure it's what makes you successful as well. And another kind of just point that I want to pick out and go off topic immediately is that you mentioned the identity piece, and it just resonates so much with me because as even as a sports physio, or maybe coaches might feel this, or athletes, we feel like this identity of I am Nick the sports physio with XYZ teams, and that gives me my identity because people come up to me and like, hey, how was this tournament or that, or you know why is it dangerous to build an identity based on I am Nick and I do X sport? What are the traps of that kind of approach?
Such an important part of being an athlete. So when you are intentional about your career, you're pretty much giving it all into that one thing. So there's hyper focus. And I would say it's a really expensive sport, not sport, an expensive journey energetically, meaning you're exchanging all of your intention and your time into this one thing that there's not always a lot of guarantee that there's a return on that in the way that you want there to be a return on it. And so it's really hard to separate who you are from what you're doing when you're an athlete because of all that time that goes into it. So you're naturally thinking, this is me, this is why I'm doing this. What ends up happening is that when things don't go your way, suddenly you lose track of like who you actually are behind all of that. And so how I see things now is, and this is how I've tracked it in my own life, is there is you, and then there's the thing that you're doing. And when you are doing that thing, you are pouring energy into that thing, and that thing will grow inevitably. So I've seen it in my own world when I was an athlete that like being a swimmer was a thing that grew. I was a musician at one point and pouring all of my energy into that. I was able to go places because of music. And then I painted after my career in swimming and sold my paintings across the world. And what that was me experimenting with, oh, if I just do this one thing and believe in it, what would happen? And if I did it consistently, what would happen? So I think like I've proven to myself that it's really more about identifying with the person behind the thing you're doing. And it takes the pressure off because you can direct that energy into any space that you want to grow intentionally. And a lot of that is valuable, like post career. But when you're actually in sport, the danger of placing every emphasis on your identity in that sport is that when you're in a high pressure moment, the pressure really compounds because now it's like, if I don't perform, what that means is that I'm a bad person. or I really suck. And you start to have all of these doubts that are like holes in a boat, where water kind of gets to leak in, that aren't necessarily true. It's just that because you're identifying that way, you're unable to see those holes in the boat when you're in the boat. And so inevitably that's where things start to fall apart. And also, you're unable to course correct quickly and effectively, which is what you need in order to like play or perform according to all of your preparation. That's giving yourself a chance, but it's hard to do that when you suddenly have these thoughts like, I'm a bad person because I'm not performing well. And that can happen in seconds as well.
I think that's such an important theme for more than athletes just to kind of hear or resonate. I'm more than just Nick the accountant or the lawyer or the mom or the dad. I'm the person, and kind of not separating but kind of having healthy boundaries between all these things is key, because
Mm.
um those things can change out of our control. And I think it's something that probably a lot of physios in sport realizes, what I've experienced as well. We tie ourselves to a team for a period of time or something, and inevitably these things end, contracts change, and then you kind of have to pick up the pieces afterwards. So, shucks, I hope people listen to that again on repeat.
Yes, absolutely. And just one more note on that. I mean, and this is something I believe so fiercely in, but that sort of renewable energy that exists within each of us, which is to say that, I would be doomed if I thought that swimming was the peak of my life experience. Because, first of all, I can't be that for my entire life, but I can be exceptional at it when I'm in it. And then I can be exceptional at the next thing I do. It's just a belief that you can um, learn to help to hold and learn to have and learn to carry into any space you go into. Um, and it kind of frees you, like it frees you because you know that when you get to the next place in your life, whatever it is, that you can do whatever you want to do to the highest degree, that you can trust that what you need will show up for you in that space, no matter what. It frees you to just give it your all without the pressure of, is this all I'll ever be in this chapter? Which I think is very, very critical for anybody, no matter your age or stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's some incredible piece of wisdom there, Tara. I want to just move on to
Okay.
um this. It's almost like a catchphrase, and people say it's the mental side of the game or the mental side of performance. But what does that even mean? And where do you find that athletes commonly kind of go astray? I don't want to say get it wrong, but what challenges them the most in terms of the mental side of their performance?
So I think what challenges a lot of athletes, and where I see like athletes getting stuck, is that maybe like not knowing that there's a flexibility within them that can move them into the spaces they want to be in. So our spirit, our very energy that we use on the sports field, is malleable. And so what happens with a lot of athletes is they identify through things that they've always thought, or they identify through people that they see around them, comparisons, all the stories that they've been told, and don't necessarily realize that all of those things are malleable, that you can shift them over time, that you can change the way you feel. And so, the mental side of sport, I've come to understand, and what I work hard to help athletes understand is actually about connection to yourself and awareness. So, becoming really aware of what's actually happening under the surface. So, to give you an example of how this happens practically, I like to use the analogy of a window or a mirror, for example. So, a window, if you're looking out a window, what's happening is that your focus is really going outward. So, that's where things like your comparison, a fear of the future, shame about the past, fear of failure, all of that exists in the window thought. So that's where your energy moves out. And when your energy is moving out, you don't have a lot of it left to do what you had to do. A mirror thought is a thought where you're looking at something, but it's reflecting back at you. So you might look at somebody that you really look up to, but instead of comparing, you might be inspired, and then you re-inject that energy into your own story. So that's a mirror thought. And one of the things I like to do with athletes is to look at where are they spending all of their energy moving outward, and how can we shift some of that back towards them? Because they are the person that they have, that they are the most familiar point that they have in the highest point of their competition. So let's say you were going out to compete at Olympic trials. Once you get behind the blocks, like in my case, once you get behind the blocks, nobody else can be there for you. Forget about your coach, forget about your parents, your friends, your team. You are the only person that can do that. So you can pull the energy from those things and be inspired by that. But at that moment, it's you and what's in front of you. And so if you've relied on a million things external to yourself to get you there and only ever practice that, in that moment, when you need to show up for you, what energy do you have? It's not easy to pull from that. So for athletes, I would say being able to shift your focus in and out is one of the most profound mental skills you can have. Your energy is always going to get distracted. You'll always be pulled outward. But if you can bring it back in a key moment, I think that's critical. And I think that's what, if I look at the most elite athletes, like world number ones, that's what I see they're really good at, is actually moving past things really quickly and being able to come back to that inner place and keep performing from that place.
I'm hearing you speak and I'm thinking, obviously we're speaking about athletes, but I keep thinking about just humans and professionals and people. And I think the theme kind of carries over just to normal life as well. And the
Mhm.
person that kind of wants to grow and improve the way they're showing up, their performance at work, a whole bunch of spheres in their life. So some incredible touch points there, Tara. I want to just pick on something and just say, um, we've heard a little bit about shifting your kind of energy back inwards, but why do you feel like why is it a challenge for athletes or people to kind of look inwards, where it's easier to focus on even maybe the external part of the training or playing your sport process, so hitting balls, catching, kicking, swimming more laps, instead of taking the time to like build this inner sort of model of performance? It is something that a lot of people struggle with, but why in so many years of sports and sports science, sports medicine, are we still struggling to shift from, the external, doing the skill part, and then doing the internal work that actually kind of compounds or exponentially increases the output of the performance? It seems like it's a strange thing that we haven't figured that out yet.
I agree. And it's pretty simple. All of what you're saying and the mental side is invisible. So we don't see it. It's intangible, it's invisible, and it's incredibly nuanced. And more than that, it's hyper specific from athlete to athlete, because every athlete has a different life experience, which informs a different way of thinking and feeling. So one thought affects one athlete completely different to the next, which is why we can look at an athlete for inspiration, but always remember that your set of circumstances are completely different. So things land differently when they land within you. So because all of these things are invisible, they're harder to grasp and not always easy to find the words for. So coaches may not always know how to approach different topics or ideas or emotions like disappointment or anger or frustration within their athletes, because, again, invisible. But all the physical preparation that we do, that's very visible and also measurable. Like, we can measure performance based on the physical. Like, you measure things all the time. But in sport, I mean, it's times or it's runs or it's wins or losses. We can measure those things very physically and then make associations to those things. But just because something is invisible doesn't mean we can't work with it. And that's where, like, I am adamant that in order to make the invisible visible, you have to set up a structure to do that. And so in team environments, that looks like making sure that you're catching all of that information when it happens. So if you go out to play a match, it's all very well to have a team talk after the match, but are you setting up another time to talk about that match where in a calm environment you can unpack different things that happened, or talk about the values and action in your team, or set up your values that you want to anchor your team with? If you're not creating intentional spaces to capture information and then use that information to better your team ethos or your team dynamic, then you're literally missing an opportunity to work with that intangible. And the intangible is what can save you in a high pressure moment. And I mean, seconds can change everything. In the middle of a race, you could think a complicated thought. It could change how your body feels. Um, if you're running or playing hockey, same thing. Doubt, fear, it holds us back. It keeps us rigid. And so if you are not paying attention to how to unlock those rigid thoughts, those doubtful thoughts, those fearful thoughts, then you're missing that opportunity to excel beyond what your physical preparation has done. To answer why we haven't, I think it's just because it's invisible and people don't talk about it. And people are afraid to go there because once you go there, there's so much to unpack, right? If you talk about failure, like that's a sticky subject. People don't like to talk about that stuff all the time. So we just got to do it on purpose, enough times for it to actually have a real impact.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, where a, a difficult topic for people to kind of broach. And I think especially in the dynamic of a team sport, sometimes it's easier in team sports because there's more people, so we feel like we don't have to have that depth of real conversations unless it's maybe in one-on-ones, or unless it's maybe in times of crisis where something's really going wrong. We kind of miss out on all the athletes that might benefit from this, even when their performance is going well, when they're kind of performing on par. And I feel like this is an important question or topic for coaches to also kind of understand, because it might unlock levels to the way that they interact and coach athletes. I'm thinking, team coaches, skills coaches, sports scientists, or S&C coaches, even physios. I think this is really important conversations to help us connect and understand why people or athletes are showing up in the way that they are. I think from a physio side of things, we get to know this a little bit more because our interaction is a bit more intimate. We spend a lot of time one-on-one with athletes, and you kind of get to know, okay, what's happening at home, what's happening life wise, where have you kind of come from, family situations. You kind of get a sense of the bigger picture, and through that, you can kind of understand what maybe makes them up. But in terms of being able to action something that's tangible to help them, we probably do lack either the time, the tools, or the influence to be able to do that in a team setting. So I think super important for coaches to kind of understand these concepts as well. Tara, I just want to go on to um, mindset coaching. And
Mm.
for someone that might not understand, hopefully they got a bit of context now. We're solidly into this episode, but for a CEO, a general manager, a head coach, or a sporting director, what is mindset coaching, and how could a team or individuals from a team um, benefit from having someone that kind of unpacks this with them?
I love that because it is applicable in all settings. And I do work with quite a number of corporate clients as well. So it surely shows up in that space as well. So what I'll say is mindset coaching is all about unearthing what is within. So it's unearthing your belief systems, your frame of reference, your goals, your aspirations, your doubts, and then turning those into practical applications. So what I love about coaching is that it is practical. So it allows for you to develop a step-by-step process to move through something that's hard to understand or sticky, or exciting, even to give you a way to bring that to life in a practical sense. So it's different from therapy, where therapy has a wonderful place. I've been to therapy. Therapy kind of allows you to go back in time and unpack what was hard or difficult or traumatic, and kind of spend time there so that you can heal those spaces, right? And it's different from the sense of coaching, which I certainly incorporate many elements of the past into my coaching, but it really focuses on where are you now and what's usable right now. And so I'm always looking for usable energy. And usable energy is not always positive energy. Sometimes it's negative energy. Sometimes it's difficult thoughts, ways of identifying that you can then say, all right, well, let's go into that space. Let's unpack what's holding you back there, and then let's like bust that block, and do that by actually doing things to move through that, or giving yourself a chance to see that you can. And I will be here alongside you like a coach is, to help you through every step of that process. So I love the practicality of coaching. I love that it is like a coach in the sense that they're there with you, helping you through step by step. And there's been a lot of breakthroughs in that sense. And I would say, I think every team should prioritize bringing somebody in, or like adapting to have the skills within that environment so that they can help their athletes in that sense. There's so much to work with there without even knowing it.
I think you touch on such a good point there, and I want to just make a comment where, and I don't want to be negative about sport psych, but I feel like sometimes the way from a sports medicine model, we lean to sports psych when things are really going wrong. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the shift here is that uh, the mindset part is applicable at various parts of the journey. Obviously, there's times to refer out, and there's pathology and mental health which needs to be addressed. But I think if we flip that around and say, let's get ahead of this, I think that's the space where the mindset coaching becomes incredibly powerful for individuals, and I think also for teams. And I want to just ask you, do you find a difference, or is it more challenging working with a sort of collective mentality of, working with a team? You've done some work in the professional cricket space with Western Province women, highly successful franchise. But I want to ask you, how does that dynamic work when you're kind of looking at the mental state of a collective or a team versus when you're working with athletes on a one-to-one basis?
I love this question. Working with a team, and I think back to Western Province Women, they were a team that's absolutely hungry to succeed. So, from a collective perspective, there was nobody on that team who was at odds with that desire. Everybody wanted the same outcome. And when you find a group of individuals that want the same outcome, it is so easy to unlock different personalities, to highlight what's working, to see, okay, who's a game changer? Did you know that you're a game changer? These behaviors tell me that you can go in a high pressure moment and turn things around. And then, oh, wait, guys, did you all know that that person has those characteristics? Oh, yes, we didn't know. Like, we've always seen that in her, but we didn't know we could call it that. Or it's quite interesting how you can leverage energy within a team when collectively people want the same outcome. I think it's important to remember that a team is, of course, made up of individuals. So when I work with a team, I don't just work with a team as a whole. I work with a team and do group sessions, but I absolutely go and work with the individuals, because the individuals make up that energy. So, there might be times when an athlete is really suffering, but suffering in silence. And to go in and have a space for that athlete to communicate that and share that and work through it can largely impact the outcome of a team, especially in a moment where they need that like unspeakable or the intangible to come to the front and help them. So high pressure moments, match point, that type of thing. Um, So yeah, it's both. Both are equally important. Both need as much like attention and detail as each other to bring the whole project to life, to bring the whole ethos to life.
Um, I want to just dive into some practical tips for
Mm.
the athletes. I mean, you've unpacked beautifully there the difference between the team, the individual, but for the athlete listening, or even for the physio or the clinician listening that wants to increase their performance or output in a healthy way, of course. What are some sort of tangible tips to kind of look within, and some maybe habits or routines that we can create about being more intentional with the self-talk, but ultimately the way that we pitch up in our environments, whether it's sport or in a professional sort of setting?
So, one of my core principles, core philosophies is connection. And that is the thing I focus on all of the time. So, I'm looking for ways for the athlete to connect with themselves. And if you're a coach, you're looking for ways to help your athlete connect with themselves. And so, in order to connect with ourselves, we have to start a conversation because guess what? A conversation's happening anyway. You having a conversation in your mind during training, during competition, it's there already. So it's just about having or gaining awareness around what does that conversation actually sound like? Is it working in my favor or is it tearing me down? Is it making me feel expansive or is it shutting me down? So, practically speaking, this could look like, what if I don't get the goal that I'm achieving or striving to achieve? What if I don't make the team? What if I don't stay in the team? What if no one likes me? That what if question might be motivating you to do a whole lot of important things in your career. But if that's a question you're practicing every week, then by the time you actually get to the trials or to the conversation with your coach, you feel so defeated because it's the energy of fear, right? And one of the things we want to look at is like, can you identify that the conversation and the questions you have every day are actually about fear rather than openness? And how can we shift it from fear to openness? So, for example, the what if question of like, what if I don't make the team might make you work harder, show up every practice, eat really healthy, sleep the same time every night. But is that making you feel alive when you have to go and compete? Or is a better way to think about that like, no matter what happens, I trust myself to show up on the day. And that's a very different energy. That is an open energy. I trust myself to guide myself through this training season. Different energy. And practicing trust means listening to what feels right for you. Like if you're absolutely exhausted and shattered, and you have to show up for a training session, I'm not suggesting athletes should skip out on training sessions, but I am suggesting that, sometimes it's worth paving your own path and being like, yep, I know that today I need a rest and I can go harder the next day. And so athletes and coaches looking to start with their mindset, to start working with their mindset, start with awareness and start having that conversation. And practically that looks like writing your thoughts down, finding somebody you trust you can talk to about your thoughts, maybe getting a mindset coach to help you once in a while, making it a regular practice, doing something like a guided visualization. I've made guided visualizations for some of my athletes, tailored them specifically to moments that they need to work on. So I will speak the situation out and then share that with them through like a video, and they actually then can switch off and close their eyes and visualize certain things that can actually help them. So there's lots of ways to do this, and then picking times in a day to do it. Like if you have practice every day at 2 p.m., at 10 to 2, what are you doing? How are you getting yourself ready for that moment? Um, if you're racing, think about the moments before you race. What are you using that energy for? And then that's the place where you can start these mindset applications to really elevate the whole experience.
I think there's some really practical tips there, Tara. And I want to segue from that into something that's kind of a space that I work in a lot, but I think it's a group that needs a lot of help. And I think you'll understand this from your background in swimming. The sort of high school, I want to say elite or high performing athlete. Obviously, I'm working a lot with rugby, which um, culturally as South Africans, it's a huge part of our national identity. But what we're seeing is there are a lot of boys being signed straight out of school. There's a lot of pressure to play in provincial weeks, et cetera, et cetera. Statistically, we know what the stats are about guys that go from the under 13s who makes it to under 18s and who eventually makes it all the way. So there's a lot of factors along this journey, but I feel there's an immense pressure on um, the young adolescent athlete or the high performing high school athlete. There's streaming, there's social media, there's parents, there's coaches, there's their peers. Um, there's so much going on in that space. I don't know if you've had experience with kind of the current landscape, but what can a young athlete that's listening to this take out from a mindset point of view, and how can they kind of become a little bit more resilient to some of the stresses that they face around their performance, and maybe if we take performance out of it, just their growth and development.
Mm. I want to start by saying that the landscape and trajectory of athletes in high school has changed so drastically. I mean, we're no longer just playing sport for fun. It's our high school athletes that are going to be recruited directly into national setups. And so, as you've said, like the pressure is just so different now. And not only that, but pressure from everybody involved in that setup is different. And so I went to a talk a couple months ago, and I remember distinctly thinking, the thing we need to avoid is trying to avoid that. We cannot change that this is the time we in. So we need to actually get on board with what's happening and not get on board with the pressure and not push our athletes more than they can handle. And what I mean by get on board is we need to provide a way to help athletes in that space. That's what we need to step in and do. And so instead of changing the circumstances, let's work with them. I always believe that's the most powerful way to do things. And so, how can we help athletes? Well, to remember that regardless of where you're going, you can always work with what you have. So, there is so much around you to work with the moment, your team environment, your coach, how you feel, where you come from, your goals. Not to add pressure, but to remember that, the moment is yours to create. And you can start now. I mean, what an opportunity to start working with that at an early stage, to acclimatize to what it means to create the outcomes you want to have. There's so much to do, so much to feel, and so much to work with. But I also understand that that can sound like there's so much pressure in addition to what they're already going through. In those moments, have ways to come back to the basics. I mean, I think even when you the best in the world, I think it's crucial that you have a way to come back to the basics, to reset, to separate from those environments at times, to remember who you are, to never forget who you are. And if you don't know who you are, take some time to think about that. Really take some time to intentionalize that. Think about what sets you on fire, what makes you afraid, what makes you feel small, what makes you feel ready. Again, it comes back to that element of awareness, but nobody can be on your path for you, and you can't be on someone else's path. So don't try to. Stay where you are, grow within that space, allow things to reveal themselves to you. And if you're in high school, just remember that you have a world ahead of you, hopefully. And there's so much to pull from as time evolves. You don't need to achieve everything now. And I think if you shift the perspective from that, I need to achieve everything right now, to I trust I can take one step at a time, you might exceed your own expectations because you are eliminating a layer of pressure in that moment.
So I think that's a great place to kind of um, have a bit of closure. But I want to just say thank you for your time and thank you for your wisdom and sharing all of that. I love that answer, and I'm definitely going to be clipping that piece and sending it to all the young talented rugby players that I work with, and young as athletes that are aspiring for kind of for greatness. I think you've given such practical tips, and I think hopefully there's going to be massive value not only to athletes but to coaches and other clinicians also listening to this episode. So thank you for your time again, Tara. I want to just ask you, where can people connect with you? One, if they want to kind of follow your content, you've got an incredible Instagram page where there's a lot of practical tips and more practical tips and sort of pearls of wisdom. But how do people connect with you if they want to work with you and kind of chip away at improving their performance?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for today, Nick. I appreciate being here. And yeah, I'm super stoked to be connecting with you and sharing here. So thank you. Um, I look forward to connecting more with athletes and coaches out there. And if you are listening to this and you would like to connect, my Instagram is Clarity Coach Tara. So you can just look up Clarity Coach. I should pop up there. Otherwise, my website, claritycoach.co.za, or my email address, tara@claritycoach.co.za. All very simple ways. But through all three of those channels, you can message me or email, and I'll get back to you. And I look forward to connecting.
I want to just say thank you once again for your time, your wisdom, your connection, and just for the valuable work that you're doing in this space, Tara. So thank you for your contributions, and we look forward to seeing where your journey is going to unfold. I've got no doubt that there are so many athletes that are going to benefit from your expertise and your professionalism in the future. And I'm sure there are some big teams and organizations that your services are exactly what they need to kind of turn the corner or reach the goals that they want to. So we'll follow your journey with great excitement.
Thank you so much, Nick. Appreciate it.